It's interesting. It's not so much a book about information. It's about a formation. It's about how to live your everyday life in practical little snippets of wisdom that it pours out. And we've been encouraging you in the month of January to read through the book. Hope you've taken up that challenge. And if you're doing the daily one, there's 31 chapters, and it gives you 31 days to something to focus on and read on each day. But the idea is to get more wisdom into our lives. In a world where AI is generating all kinds of deep fakes, and cryptocurrencies abound, and people are turning to Botox or, artificial wombs, and suicide pods, and all these other things that we never heard of in years gone by. And it's like the world is changing, and the world is filled with all this information and all this knowledge. And yet, wisdom is another beast altogether. Wisdom is something that our world needs. This past year has been a challenge there's been some great things and some challenging things in the church as far as leadership goes. And I look at our overseers team, and I've been so thankful for them, and I'm just going to do a little shout out to them. Over the last year, we've had some challenges, and also some real joys in this journey. And in 2025, and you've been around the last year, so you know some of them. But one thing that I've been really impressed is the wisdom of some of these people that are on that team, and working with them, and the way they've poured themselves into doing the right thing, even though it's really hard. And so it's just been really great to be a part of that team, and shout out to those people who are a part of that. And I want to get into the book of Proverbs, though, and look at some wisdom for today. And one of the first things, last week we looked at chapter 1, and chapter 2 today, the very first word that pops in chapter 2, verse 1, it says this: my son, my son. Well, the screens are blank. Or no, my glasses are working. Yeah, it starts off this way. Chapter 2, verse 1 starts off, the first two words are, my son. You go into chapter 3, the very first words are, my son. You go into chapter 4, and the words are, my son. You go into chapter 5, and same thing. And you go all the way up to 7, the first 3 words. And it strikes me that what's happening here is that there's a father who's wanting to give advice to his son. He wants to pour his heart out. He has all this wisdom and all these things he's learned from experience over the years, and he's come to the point where it's like, I've got to pass this on to my son. And so he goes over and over on this. And could you, the slides in the back are still working, so I can see them. So if you could just pop ahead a couple more slides to my slide 5. There we go. Thank you. One of the things that I learned, I have 3 kids growing up, and as they were growing up, you see them, they're all kind of wired differently. And the youngest one, he was very quiet, and he would look at the older ones and see everything that they did right and everything that they did wrong. And he would, make his decisions based on what worked or didn't work for his older siblings. And the interesting thing about that is he didn't make as many mistakes because he was very careful, because he saw the consequences and what happened when you made those decisions. And because experience can be a hard teacher, right? Some people are wired, that's the way they learn best, right? That you have to make some mistakes and you have to experience things for yourself. Other people can learn from books or from parents or from teachers and from pastors, and they can respond. That's the easier way. If you could do that, it's like bonus. And here's a dad coming along and saying, my son, learn from me. Learn this way, because it's It's the best way to learn. You don't go through the regrets the same way. Like Solomon, King Solomon was the one who wrote the book, as we mentioned last week, and he had some big regrets. He made some mistakes. For as wise as he was, and God blessed him with incredible wisdom, but he made a huge mistake. In chapter 11, it says this, King Solomon, however, loved many foreign women. Back in those days, they would kings would marry people, other kings' daughters to create alliances, and that was sort of part of the world they lived in. But God did not take that as a good plan. King Solomon, however, loved many foreign women besides Pharaoh's daughter, was his first wife. And there's Moabites and Ammonites and Ebonites, Sidonians, Hittites. And the bottom line is these wives led him astray, led him away from God because they had other gods. Now Solomon's son that replaced him, his name was Rehoboam. His mom was an Ammonite, one of the women listed in the previous verse. And he became the next king. And a summary verse that kind of sums up his life, the chronicler wrote in chapter 12 and verse 14 of 2 Chronicles, he said, Rehoboam, did evil because he did not set his heart on seeking the Lord. He didn't set his heart on seeking the Lord. He didn't follow God's ways. There was one particular instance in his reign that kind of stands out. Perhaps you remember in 1 Kings records at a time when the people came to him. He had just become king, and the people come to him and says, your father, Solomon, put a heavy yoke on us, but now lighten the harsh labor and the heavy yoke he put on us, and we will serve you. We'll gather around you. You will be our king. So this is the whole nation of Israel. And so he goes and seeks some advice about this. Should I do this or not? He goes to his counselors, and they say, yeah, you should lighten the load. They've been taxed pretty heavily. And Solomon had all these building ideas and grandiose dreams, and it's time to give him a little bit of a break. That'd be good. And we got to keep the kingdom together. But he didn't do that. He didn't follow the wisdom. He listened to his younger peers, and he kept pushing the people, and ended up losing 11 of the 12 tribes. One other one came back eventually, and there was 2. But the nation was split after him, and most of them no longer followed Rehoboam. And it just reminds you that he made a bad decision. And when you don't apply wisdom, you don't listen to the counsel and wisdom of others, that things don't go well. And I wonder about the book of Proverbs. Like, we're not sure when it was written, at what point in his life, but I tend to lean towards the idea that it was written towards the end of his life. As he looked back, and he had all this experience and all this wisdom, and he wanted then to pass it on to his son or sons, the wisdom that he had. And he reflected, he realized he had made some mistakes, and said, my son, don't make the same mistakes that I made. And he wanted to pass on some of that experience. There's an interesting section when he talks about his father in chapter 4, verses 3 and 4. He says, for I too was a son, Solomon, was a son to my father, which would be David, right? King David, the famous king of Israel. Still tender and cherished by my mother. Then he taught me, David taught me, and he said to me, and he lists a bunch of things that in the next few verses that his father said to him. And then I want to focus on verses 7 and 8. Because this is kind of how he ends that little section. He says, what was David saying? Get wisdom, though it cost you all you have. Get understanding. Cherish her, and she will exalt you. Embrace her, and she will honor you. He's really passionate about it here. The one thing, get wisdom, though it costs you everything. It's like the most important thing. I think David was that passionate about it because he also had made some mistakes. Solomon's mom was Bathsheba, and perhaps you know her story. He learned the hard way. He had some regrets. He made some bad decisions. And he wanted the best for his son. He wanted the best for Solomon. He didn't want him to walk down that same path and make the same mistakes. So maybe the best question that he would say here, if there's one thing, Solomon, I want you to do is get wisdom, right? This would be the best question maybe ever. And this is the way Andy Stanley said it once. He said, in light of my past experiences and my present circumstances and my future hopes and dreams, what is the wise thing to do? What's the wise thing to do? And I think David felt this way when he was explaining this to his son. He says, just sell everything. Even if it costs you all you have, get wisdom. It's that important. The best question is not, is this a sin, or is this permissible, or is this, is someone going to like me if I do this? The best question is this the wise thing to do? And so, and why does he say that? Well, this is something that Solomon says towards the end of his book in chapter 20, verse 7. He says, the righteous lead blameless lives. And then guess what? What's the result? Blessed are their children after them. When you live righteously, when you make good decisions, you apply wisdom into your life, it affects the next generation. And we've seen it, right? You've seen the dysfunction that gets passed from generation to generation. Well, blessing and good wisdom can get passed generationally too. We say Solomon, we read, had a weakness, ended up marrying all these different wives, and they turned his heart away. And well, David had a similar problem. He lusted after Bathsheba and created a big dysfunctional mess there. And it's like father, like son. And that stuff can be transferred. And he's saying, we need to be wise. As I say, later on in his life, he looks back and he said, don't make the same mistakes I made. So I want to, just as I was thinking about this, I wanted to talk about some Proverbs for parents today. Because it strikes me that right at the beginning, in chapter 2, he talked about, it was clear he's writing to my son. And he wanted to pass this information on to the next generation. And so in that spirit, I looked through Proverbs, and there's probably hundreds of things I could say, but I've narrowed it down to a few key things that I think this is great for parents. In fact, it's great for anybody. But parents take note especially. We need this kind of wisdom. I needed this kind of wisdom. The first one is this. And this comes up all the way through Proverbs. And that's the idea, the concept of teaching consequences. In our world, there are consequences to the actions. There's the laws of nature, that if you try to defy them, there are consequences, right? Gravity will pull you down. There are consequences, right? And in relationships, too, there are consequences to behaviors. And it can get painful. The Bible talks about this. He talks about the law of the harvest, right? You reap what you sow, right? There are consequences to behavior. And sometimes people will grow up and they'll try to ignore that, right? And they'll blame others. People love to blame others, right? And you see kids all the time. It's kind of sad when you see adults doing it, not taking responsibility for their actions and playing the victim card or blaming somebody else. But we do it. We all do it. But what we need to understand is there are consequences, and our behaviors have spurred on many of these consequences. And either we don't like them, we find them painful, and we try to blame others for them. Look at how let's go back to that first verse, chapter 2, verse 1. My son, notice the word if. If you accept my words and store up my commands within you, turning your ear to wisdom and applying your heart to understanding. Indeed, if you call out for insight and cry aloud for understanding, and if you look for it as for silver and search for it as for hidden treasure. Then, see the if, then the result, the consequence, then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. If has consequence. If you do these things, then this is, and it's a basic principle, right? And yet Proverbs is built on this concept all the way through. If you do this, then these are the results. Not always. It doesn't always work that way. There are always exceptions. But generally speaking, this is the way wisdom works. Here he says, then you'll understand the fear of the Lord. We talked about that last week. That fear of the Lord, the awe and the reverence we have, the fear of not getting too far away from God, of being apart from God. Fear of the Lord is not something we run from or we dread. It's something that draws us closer and keeps us closer to him. So where do you get this kind of wisdom? Where do you find it? Can you just, buy it off Amazon, right? Watch some TV and you get some wisdom? No, it says in verse 6, for the Lord gives wisdom, and from his mouth comes knowledge and understanding. The Lord gives wisdom. That's a great statement there. The Lord is the one who gives wisdom. I remember back in the parenting when we had teenagers, and it was especially challenging. And I was feeling pretty lost and feeling hopeless at one point when things weren't going so well. And it's like, oh, this is such a challenge. It's so hard. I remember reading this about a CEO, a business owner, and he had a big company in the U.S. and he said that he walked into this business. Everybody was, hey sir, it's good to see you, and treated him like. And if he asked it, everyone would jump and it would be done immediately, and then he'd go home. And he had teenagers too, right? And he'd try that at home. It did not work at all. He had all this respect and all this power and all this influence at work, and he went home and there was nothing. And it's like he had said, it's the hardest thing. It's the hardest thing. It's so easy to run off to work, to come home in that kind of a situation. And it just reminded me that parenting is hard. If you're in it, if you've got kids, and there's some challenges, and there'll be questions, and there'll be difficult times, and that's why it gives me hope, right? And it carried me during the tough times that wisdom comes from the Lord. Probably prayed the most for my family during those days because I knew that's where the wisdom would come from. In Proverbs 22, verse 6, it says this, start children off on the way they should go, and even when they are old, they will not turn from it. Train up, the way I learned it in the older English translations, train up a child in the way he will go, right? And when they're old, they will not depart from it. You start them off on the way, you get them a good foundation, give them a good launching pad, and then when they're old, they won't turn from it. And there are examples, I can see that even in my own life, in our family. But it doesn't always work that way, does it? And some of you also know the other side. You say, well, and that's one thing you have to say here. Again, these are not promises. God doesn't promise everything's going to work out if you do things the right way. These are principles. They're observations about life. If you do these things, generally this will happen, but not always, and certainly not always in families. Let me show you another example of this in Proverbs 15, verse 1. A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. There's a good one, isn't it? You think, and again, that's a great principle because it's generally true that if someone comes at you and they're raising their voice and they're upset and they're angry, and you just calmly respond and in a kind, give them a gentle answer, it's a very different mood than if you come back full horsepower and fist swinging. Generally speaking, you can diffuse anger by the way you respond in a situation. Isn't that true? Now, it doesn't always work, though. There are people who will still hate and still beat you up, even if you respond properly. Like I say, not a promise, but a principle. And the principle is one of grace. And giving people the benefit of the doubt, listening, hearing, and responding gently. It makes a difference. And maybe in your home, would be a great verse for you. In our city, the mayor, I got an email from the mayor's coordinator or something, asking, the mayor wants to hold a symposium on kindness. He wants Ottawa to become a kinder city. Maybe you've heard about this or read something. He's been talking about that lately. And so he's invited some people, or he is inviting some people to come in and talk about this. And as I was reading the email, I had been reading this verse and thinking, oh, maybe I can use some of Solomon's wisdom to help Ottawa, right, to become a kinder place as we think about how do we turn this hate-fueled economy or hate-fueled environment around to one, and part of that will be the way we respond. As a church, as a family, as a city, it makes a difference, right? This principle of grace, believing the best about people, and not returning harsh anger against anger. Here's another observation built on this one that I've thought about. Parents who treat church as optional shouldn't be surprised when their kids treat Jesus as unnecessary. You see, there are consequences, right, to actions. And if you downplay, oh, we'll go to church, I don't feel like it today, oh, we'll go next month, or, I know you're here, so this is none of you, right? You would ever do this. But isn't it true there are people that treat church as optional? Oh, we don't, it's okay, I guess we'll go today. I shouldn't be surprised when their kids see, because they'll take it a little bit further than you, right? Oh yeah, I don't really need Jesus. I don't really need faith. Not a guarantee again, but generally speaking, this is the way life works. Let's go on to another one. This is from Proverbs 13. Yeah, Proverbs 13:24. A refusal to correct is a refusal to love. Love your children by disciplining them. Again, the older translations, spare the rod and spoil the child. Remember, you've heard that? A little harsher translation. The idea, though, behind it is this. You got to discipline, right? Discipline is an important part of raising kids, right? There needs to be guardrails, and there needs to be consequences when they step over those lines. And here's the point, I guess, that I would say in regards to that for parents is God isn't trying to keep you from having fun, but to keep you from having regrets, right? He's not trying to ruin your fun. He just doesn't want you to destroy your life. And we see a lot of that around, right? Lots of regrets. And I think David and Solomon are so passionate about this. You know, David said, my son, get wisdom above everything. You see the passion in that. And Solomon writes, my son, and it's like all this stuff he's pouring out to his son. They really feel passionate about it. This is really important to them because they know they've had regrets. They made some big mistakes, and they don't want that next generation to experience them. They often do, because actions often speak louder than words, unfortunately. And that's why we got to do our best to act wisely and not just speak wisdom, right? But this is not just good for parents, right? This is good for all of us, right? That God isn't just trying to keep us from having fun when he puts some boundaries and guardrails on things. He doesn't want you to ruin your lives either. He wants the best for you. Here's another one. Proverbs 13:20, one of the famous ones. Walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm. Students, choose your friends wisely. right? You walk with the wise, and guess what? You become wiser. You will make wiser decisions. But a companion of fools, when you bring the guy smoking weed home, introduce him to your parents, and they freak out, and you're wondering, why? Why are you freaking out? Mom and Dad, cool, he's cool. And they're thinking, well, yeah, but there's bad things going on here. Oh, no, it's not me. I'm not into that, you know. And we fool ourselves. Here's the principle, okay? Number 3, show me your friends, and I will show you your future, right? You walk with the wise, you become wise. But a companion of fools suffers harm. Show me your friends, and I will show you your future. You marry someone who makes you better, right? You marry someone who helps you to become a better person. My wife likes to watch her cop shows and whodunit sort of shows. And so often it's like good people that are just in the wrong place with the wrong people at the wrong time, and they end up getting busted, right? And your heart's supposed to bleed for them because they're really good people, but they're, you know, you watch this over and over again. It's like, and it just reminds you that you hang out with the wrong people. It doesn't matter how good your heart is, right? You do the wrong thing, you suffer harm, right? I know growing up, I had a friend in school in grades 4 and 5, one of my better friends in school. I don't remember a lot from grade 4 and 5, but I do remember this buddy I had, and he was a bit of a bully. I was probably the biggest kid in the class. I grew up fast, and I was taller, and I thought stronger than anyone. And anyway, this guy came along, and he was a bully. He decided kind of wanted to be my friend, and so I was friends with him, and he would bully people, and I'd feel a bit uncomfortable. I sort of viewed myself unofficially the kind bully, you know. Tried to balance this friend of mine who was doing things wrong. And anyway, after grade 5, we went separate ways in different schools, and I kind of lost touch with him. And a few years later, I heard he was in jail. And I was thinking to myself, you know, God, thank you that you removed me from that situation, right? Because the problem is you get involved with people, the wrong, you know, you can get down the wrong road, right? Show me your friends, and I'll show you your future. The 4th principle, last one. Listen, my son, to your father's instruction, and do not forsake your mother's teaching. They are a garland to grace your head and a chain to adorn your neck. I love that. A garland, it's something beautiful, right? It's like he's trying to paint a picture of beauty, this garland and this chain that adorns your neck, right? It's beautiful. When you see a father and mom working together, teaching together, and pulling together on the same team, it's like, that's the best. So I worded this way, the 4th one. Harmony in the home is beautiful. Peace on the home front is the best, right? When your home is a safe retreat, when you don't come home and, you know, on pins and needles wondering what's going to happen when you open the door, right? And some of you knows what that's like. It can be fixed, right? You can do something about it. But it's a beautiful thing when you're working together. One of the areas that I had said before that Pam and I struggled was in the area of disciplining kids. Pam and I were in different camps, and we needed some help, right? We went to the Word, we prayed a lot, and even went and got some counseling on it too to help us figure out how to do this properly, because we realized we needed to be together on the same team. This was hugely important to us. And it didn't just happen. It was something that had to be worked upon. Another interesting story on this happened last Sunday. We did some baptisms. 6 the youth were baptized. If you were here, you saw that. And one of the guys that was being baptized, he'd been from mainland China. He grew up in China and just come over recently to Canada. He came out to church. He lives with a guy, John, who's in our church here, and he's lived in a home. John met his dad out on a cruise, I guess, and met him on a cruise like years ago. And eventually he kept to high school, and the dad sent his son. They stayed in touch and sent his son to over here. And John, can you stay at your place? And John says, yeah. Anyways, so this whole thing unfolds, and Kenny, then he comes out to youth group here, and he comes out to church, and ends up becoming a follower of Jesus, baptized last Sunday. Anyway, before the baptism, John, I guess, had the conversation. Do you think you should tell your dad? Back home in China? Ooh, I don't know. Maybe not. Anyway, so it was kind of debated a little bit, and finally, Kenny says, yeah, I think I'll tell my dad. So he phones him up and says, Dad, I got something to tell you. I don't know what he's thinking. Maybe he's going to get excommunicated. His dad's going to say, get in a plane, get home. No, you get some cult or something. I don't know what he's going to say. But he phones up and says, Dad, I'm going to get baptized tomorrow, become a follower of Jesus. And his dad responds and says, that's cool. I'm a follower of Jesus too. And he didn't even know that. It's like, I guess in communist China, you can't say much about that, right? I don't know the whole stuff, but it's like, wow, God, you worked it out. How cool is that? And when you make those wise decisions, God sort of works. I think they met on a cruise, and how did God work that all out? And it's just a beautiful thing, when you see God pouring wisdom into life and see people responding to it. And so my challenge to you in closing is this: before you respond to situation, before you speak, before you click on that, on the mouse and hit send or tap the card, say, is this the wise thing to do? Is this what God would want me to do? In your families, wisdom isn't something just to admire; it's something to practice. And it be my hope and prayer that would be something you would practice this week. Let's pray. Father in heaven, I thank you for this time together. Thank you for your word. It's so practical and reminds us of these principles of Scripture that help us to live our lives in ways that we know are the best for us. Give us the wisdom to know what to do, but also the strength to act wisely, despite all the influence that may push us in a different direction. God, help us to know that you're with us and that you'll give us that wisdom at the time we need. I pray for those parents who are struggling. Maybe they're worn out and weary. Maybe they're feeling a bit lost in what the next step is or how to deal with a certain child. Or maybe it's a child dealing with their parents and they're so frustrated right now. God, I just pray you pour wisdom into their lives. Help them to know the right thing to do. Help them to turn to you for strength and to receive that wisdom so that, God, you might impact and change their lives. Thank you for being with us today. In the name of Jesus we pray. Amen.